ride through the weekend, never.
למדני אלוהי, ברך והתפלל, על סוד הלקמל, על נוגה פרי בשל, על החירות הזאת, לראות, לחוש, לנשום, לדעת, לייחל, להיקשר. למד את שפתותיי ברכה ושיר הלל, והתחדש זמנך עם בוקר ועם ליל. לבל יהיה יומי היום כתמול שלשום, לבל יהיה עליי יומי הרגל. למד את שפתותיי ברכה ושיר הלל, בהתחדש זמנך עם בוקר ועם ליל. לבל יהיה יומי היום כתמול שלשום, לבל יהיה עליי יומי הרגל. כי ביתי בית תפילה יקרא לכל העמים, כי ביתי בית תפילה יקרא לכל העמים, כי ביתי בית תפילה יקרא לכל העמים, כי ביתי בית תפילה יקרא לכל העמים. כי ביתי בית תפילה יקרא לכל העמים, כי ביתי בית תפילה יקרא לכל העמים, כי ביתי בית תפילה יקרא לכל העמים, כי ביתי בית תפילה יקרא לכל העמים.
Are visiting us for the first time today, and for those who have been here more than once or twice. I am very honored to be the only woman of the group to welcome you, and I will be, since most of you didn't give me, am I supposed to introduce you as well? Okay. because I could say a few things. But first, I would like to introduce to you Father Dennis Kriz of St. Phillip Benzie Church in Fullerton. Thank you. He's actually very close to where I live on my side of town. His first claim to fame, is that he grew up speaking Czech. So, Father, you can have a conversation with three of our Torahs who are from Czechoslovakia as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He started out studying chemical engineering, which of course led him to religion. But his first love was actually astronomy, and I find it very interesting. I had an astronomy teacher once, and at the very end of the course, I said, so how do you balance your belief in science versus your belief in religion? And he shrugged his shoulders and said, some things you just have to accept. So I can understand that. In his senior year of high school, he was convinced by his parents that there were no jobs in astrophysics, which was where he was headed, and so he should pick something a little more practical. And his dad wanted him to study medicine, and he told him he couldn't stand the sight of blood. So there you go. He worked down to what he and his father both understood, chemistry, and his dad suggested that he was going to be a chemist, then he might as well become a chemical engineer because that was more practical. And so that led him to where he is today, somehow. I'm sure you can tell us more about that. There you go. I would also like to introduce to you Imam Qaisar Waheed Shabir of the Islamic Center of Fullerton. He is a peace activist and a philanthropist. He teaches seminary works on the Quran, Sirah, the way of the Prophet lived his life, and the prophetic biography, as he helps dispel misconceptions about Islam, something that we all know too much about. He has traveled the world to gain firsthand knowledge of religions, from staying with Buddhist monks to Hindu pundits. He is proficient in multiple languages, including Arabic, Aramaic, and Sanskrit, and he has studied for over 18 years directly under Islamic masters of knowledge and wisdom. And so we are here today to learn from these leaders in our midst and to ask the questions that we find interesting as well, to help dispel our own myths and legends of where we want to be as a unified community. Thank you for being here. I will hand the microphone over to Rabbi.
Bruchim Abayim, welcome to TVT. Thank you for being here, and thank you for agreeing to come here for lunch and conversation. I couldn't think of a nicer way to celebrate Shabbat than with very good friends and very good food. Thank you for those that made sure that we have a beautiful lunch, Lynette and the Cohens, and who am I missing? Johnny and Miriam and Esther. I hope I'm not missing anyone. But all those that were involved somehow in making sure that we had such a beautiful lunch, thank you very much. And thank you those that came from other communities, from the community of Father Kriz and from Imam Shabir to be with us in this afternoon of Saturday of Shabbat. So the idea that we had in terms of having an interfaith conversation is very often those conversations are about, okay, let's talk about the things that we agree on. So we share a unified front. Or let's talk about the things that you use to define the other one. So which basically means I will ask you questions that are reflective of what I already know about you, as opposed to approach you with curiosity and trying to learn who you are and what moves you. So we decided to structure our conversation slightly differently. And to talk, this is the month of November. In the American calendar, this is time of gratitude. So we started thinking about thinking of gratitude, speaking about gratitude, and giving ourselves an opportunity to share about our faith traditions and who we are and what are the things that move us. So we'll be sharing some ideas. We'll be discussing on those ideas. And then we will have some opportunity for you to ask a few questions if you like. And we'll enjoy this afternoon together. Are you ready? Okay, so the almost the obligatory question is, as we are approaching Thanksgiving, is how you understand, how your faith tradition looks at gratitude. So we'll try to share some ideas. Imam, you want to go first?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والأشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه المجاهدين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. So in Islam, we have a very interesting concept of gratitude, and it's very strongly connected to the attributes of God. And as we know, the attributes of God in Islam, as I'm sure in the Jewish faith as well as in the Christian faith, they're very inimitable, they're very unique. They don't have no plurality per se. So for gratitude, in the attributes that we have, one of them is al-shukur, for God, meaning the gracious. And the one who studies this learns that the rewards of that connection with that attribute comes from gratitude. And also, one learns that through God, He grants manifold rewards for a modicum of good works, lauding those who are obedient to Him. The scholars, the ulama, say that al-shakur is derived from the word shukr, which means gratitude. You have graciousness and you have gratitude, manifesting through one's actions, words, and that which is hidden and that which is manifest. But in realizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, is the gracious and appreciative, al-shakir, when you combine the two, extends it with the depths and breadths of being grateful for His blessing, preferring obedience to Him on one and alone and no one else, seeking His mercy, witnessing His graces, and by making sure that you are for God, by God, and you shall always return to God. To connect in this in-depth understanding of God's name, it is for one to seek out the enabling grace, which we call tawfiq, of Allah through His guidance, as well as that which is to show gratitude, which is customarily understood. In the Quran, there's a verse in the Quran in Surah Al-Ibrahim, and as we know, Abraham is the patriarchal father of all these beautiful three religions that we are presently witnessing. And Ibrahim, as we know him, it stands very, very close to the hearts of the Muslims, as we call him Abu al-Anbiya, the father of the prophets. And in Surah Ibrahim, which is the 14th chapter of the Quran, verse number 7, Allah gives a beautiful expression about shukr, gratitude. And it is, وَإِذْ تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكُمْ لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you are thankful, I will most certainly increase you in goodness. So the more that you are thankful to God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will consistently increase you with that good. Now that good doesn't necessarily mean just in good times we will be always thankful to God. It is in the hard times of trials and tribulations, and doubts and frustrations, in which even then we are to show gratitude. Even in those moments we are to show that still, come what may, we will not be the problem that adds on to the problem. We will not be that weed that grows from the seed. We will weed out our shortcomings in His understandings of the fact that we are here to serve you, Lord. And there's a beautiful expression that detachment in this sense does not necessarily mean that you do not own anything, but that not everything owns you except the Lord of the worlds. meaning you become a source of thanks for others too. And the blessings don't just come from you, but even those who have helped you in the smallest of ways, be it through a smile, be it through a charitable act, be it through a helping endeavor. And that small act brings about a great transformation and a change in your life. And one of them for me would be that I remember when I was doing a concert in 2007 for Darfur, called Peace for Darfur in Wembley Arena. And we raised 2.2 million pounds on that night for Darfur. And I remember that we were struggling very hard to sell the tickets. We had a postal strike and no tickets were going out, and we were literally 5 days away from the concert to be performed. We only sold 3,000 tickets in an auditorium of 11,000. I was wondering, how are we going to get through this? We're not even breaking even. And I remember it was on a Friday that I had a call from someone very, very dear to me who was passing away from cancer. And as she was passing away from cancer, whereby the cancer had spread all into her body, she rings me and she says, I'm in hospital. The cancer has spread all over my body. But I'm praying to God that your concert's going to be a success. Now, I don't know how to even quantify that. And her words manifested into a miracle. But not did we just sell out the auditorium, but there was 3,000 people more waiting outside to get in. And what dawned upon me till this day, from 2007 now, as someone who was passing away in so much pain, and I'm sure some people can empathize who've lost loved ones to cancer, that the last person you'll be thinking about is anybody else except yourself. You won't be thinking about Mr. X, Y, and Z or Miss X, Y, and Z. This person, in her dying moments, how of everyone, herself was thinking about me. Which took my breath away. And every time I think of my hard times, as well as my good times, that woman's prayer has never left my ear. So it is even in the smallest of things that you find your beauty and solace and contentment. And just to add on to an expose of what I just said, I won't take too long, that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, actually talked about this in a hadith where he said, أغتنم خمسا قبل خمس شبابك قبل حرمك, that take 5 before 5. أغتنم خمس قبل خمس شبابك قبل حرمك وصحتك قبل سقمك وغناك قبل فقرك وغذاك قبل شغلك وحياتك قبل موتك, which means take 5 before 5, your youth before your old age, your health before your illness, your richness before your poverty, your free time before your work, your life before your death.
Amen.
Therefore, in Islam, every life is sacred, no matter where you're from. That's our virtues of being, understanding the reasons of gratitude and shukr.
Shukran.
Yeah, I was the one who offered this pedestrian question of gratitude because of it being close to Thanksgiving, but I do think it's a nice one. First, I'm amazed. We talked and we had to talk, or the biography that you found somewhere or somehow. I don't know, but actually there's
Are you
a part
grateful
of it,
for that?
I'll take 2 minutes to go because obviously there was a radical change there, and part of it was that the chemical engineering at the end of the day was really, really hard to explain to others. or very boring. That it became really, really hard. That at a party I always had 2 minutes to explain what I was doing before everybody's eyes glazed over. They would say, "Oh, you must be smart," and didn't mean that as a compliment, and and that was it. So that, and then also that while I was studying at USC for my doctorate, my mother first fell ill and then died of cancer, and that really caused a big change. And so I just basically crashed into the USC Catholic Center from then on and became really, really active there. I did finish my doctorate. Those who know me know this thing. Like I am almost the embodiment of the passage in Isaiah or Ezekiel, the drop of water coming down and not ending until its mission is completed. That whatever task I'm given, I generally try to take it to the end. So I finished my doctorate, and then after that I went the next year entered into the seminary. My stepmother by that time, my dad remarried, was laughing at me that I was going to be a perpetual student, and to some extent I was, but actually looking at that now, it's been 25 years that I've been, or almost 25 years as being a priest, and it has just flown. But okay, now to this question of gratitude. Okay, my parents were Czechoslovakian. They both grew up in Prague, but certainly my dad's family was even one generation from basically the countryside. And so I still knew my grandmother's roots, still knew my parents actually, the generation very well. And in the Bohemian countryside, there honestly, anywhere something happened, two ox carts crashed, somewhere on some country intersection. There would, regardless of whether somebody was hurt or somebody died or it all turned out okay, there would be a little niche there, a little cross there or something. And this is the thing that certainly in popular Catholicism or in poor people's Catholicism, gratitude was a really big thing. When you found that something happened that really shouldn't have happened, that by all rights it should have ended much, much worse. There was just simply a need, and I think it's a kind of a universal need. When you know that's to say thanks to someone. And in Catholicism, it really became mostly to Mary. I mean, there's all sorts of Marian shrines all over Europe, but really it would be, Lord, if you give me this task, or if you grant me this favor, whatever it is, that my mother be better, that I get this job, that my kids come back from war, I will do. And usually it was that you went to some shrine and you gave thanks. And it's sort of, Hannah, and Samuel, right, that she goes to the temple there or the tabernacle there, and and then so forth. And in 1 Samuel, it's a similar thing. And then when she has her kid, she gives thanks and so forth. This has really been a very, very popular and useful thing. And when one goes all across Europe, in a sense, with this thing, and you go to Mexico, you go to Brazil, certainly in Argentina, right? This kind of thing. The shrines are just filled with ex voto gifts. And really, some of them are just so touching. There was one time we were in Naples when I was in the seminary at the Shrine of Our Lady of Pompeii. And walking around, I saw 4 separate pictures of a case of basically a family where their kid fell out of the train and lived. And, again, you go say, by all rights, this kid should have died, right? I mean, should it be, and no, he was okay. And so they went there and they put up a little picture. Up in northern Italy at another place, saw again a shrine there, and there's a picture of one mother there, and this is again in the countryside or whatever, giving thanks that all 5 of her kids came back from World War II. And you go, and there was next to it was another one where, was giving thanks and showing her husband with a cane walking back, but that he at least came back at all. And so gratitude, in the sense that in Catholicism, gratitude has been really a big thing, again, in this way of when something again, by all rights, could have gone really bad, and it goes, well, thanks be to God, and to find a popular expression to it. And I suppose even in our history here, of course, that the pilgrims certainly here were really, really grateful that they lived through the first year, right? That they crashed there basically in Massachusetts, at the beginning of winter. They were kept alive really by the indigenous peoples there, who taught them even how to farm the land and so forth, and they came through. And so, again, it was, really, thanks be to God that we made it, because we didn't have to. And that kind of expression, I think, is generally, it's certainly expressed in Catholicism a lot, but I think is sort of a universal thing. And to some extent, sometimes I wonder, folks who do not believe, what do you give thanks? How do you do that when something really, really nice happens? And even again, encountering the love of your life or whatever, how do you say thanks, or to whom do you say thanks, and so forth? Well, we have, certainly in Catholicism, a lot of people to give thanks, from God to Jesus to, in Catholicism, certainly to Mary.
Thank you, Father. Can you hear me well? Yeah. Thank you. I'll tell you how you do that, because we just we just actually like to play with the idea. But I want to say that I think that I'm struck by two things that you said, the two of you, different things. Imam, you said that you cannot let everything own you. You can own everything, but not everything can own you. And I think that that decision, that awareness as we try to live our lives is such an important one. And how we define what we own and what owns you, what owns us is an interesting challenge. And I want to talk about that from a different perspective in a moment. And Father, that need to recognize, right? Like to recognize that something has happened and the need to articulate it. I think is crucial. It's a human need to which religion has been able to provide a channel, an articulation for. So a couple of things about gratitude from a Jewish perspective. So we are reading in our Torah cycle right now the stories of Jacob and his wives. Mm-hmm. And I say his wives because he had 4. Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah, the midwives. They help in order to provide the 12 children, or 13 if you, of course, count Dinah, their daughter. And as these children are being born, Leah is really struggling because she understands that she's not the most loved by Jacob. Jacob loved Rachel. So how does Leah call the firstborn? The firstborn is Reuben, which means, Reu, see, I have a son, Ben. So I have a child. Look at me. Acknowledge me. And all the names respond to that pattern of Leah's need to be recognized, to be acknowledged. And it changes at some point when she calls her son Judah. The root of the word Yehudah, Judah, is Odaya, gratitude. She was hoping to be recognized. She was hoping to be acknowledged. She wasn't owning her journey. And at some point, she discovers gratitude. And all of a sudden, her own life becomes her own story. Until that moment, it didn't happen. So gratitude is the key to a mindful life in our tradition. And just as a side note, later on, Judah, this character gave the name to the kingdom, or the kingdom of Judah took the name of Judah, and we became the Jews. So So our very name suggests Judaism, gratitude. We are meant to be the grateful people. It's about being grateful. Now, what's about gratitude? Well, an interesting thing first is that in the story of Judah, once again, this is my side note, one of the most interesting things about this man is that he has the opportunity over his lifetime to make teshuvah, to change the path of his life by repenting and taking a different course of action for his own life. And this idea that we live our lives with the possibility, with the opportunity to rectify our ways and to conduct our life in a mindful way is a reason to always be grateful. Now, let's talk about gratitude in the context of mindfulness. Jewish tradition says that you are supposed to say 100 blessings a day. Good luck with that. Now, what's about saying 100 blessings of a day? If you think that from a very dry perspective, well, apparently we think that we have a very needy God. If those blessings are for God, so somehow our tradition is saying, well, you need to be feeling that divine presence with your gratitude and your blessings all day long. Or an alternative to that idea is that blessings are our instrument, are our tool to connect with God and to recognize the gift of our lives and to be mindful as we direct our lives. And I believe it's the second option, of course. And in that context, to what you said, Father, I think that God, in the context of gratitude, is the address. It's also sometimes the foundation. But gratitude is an experience that is meant for human growth. And here are the two last ideas. When you study psychology, there are, for example, if you want to experience joy, what's the foundation for joy? It's gratitude. Now, if you are experiencing anger, what are you supposed to exercise in order to overcome that anger? Gratitude. So one of the most important foundations in order to grow, in order to heal, in order to enjoy our lives, is to experience gratitude. And last thing, a beautiful story that connects with your story, Imam. I know how personal that story is and how important that story is for you. A couple of months ago, we lost a beloved member of FEMA and a beloved member of our congregation, Rabbi Art Levine. And I shared this story with the congregation because it was such an Art Levine thing to do. Rabbi Art Levine, I was visiting him, and this happened a few days before his death, and he was a rabbi, he was dying, and we knew, and he knew, and I was the rabbi who was supposed to serve him and his family in the next couple of days. And I look at him and say, Art, is there anything that you would like to discuss with me? Is there anything that you'd like me to be aware of? And he says, I'm sorry I couldn't help you more. And what's behind that is like his gratitude for his journey, for his own journey, the gratitude that he had for his own life and for his ability to give, to grant things. He knew that he had the power and the ability to give things. And we say in our prayers in the morning, "Kol hazman sheneshama bekirbi, modeh ani lefanecha." For as long as my soul is within me, I will express my gratitude to you, because ultimately, the ability and the possibility to experience gratitude equals to being alive. And in that moment, my friend told me that he's alive. So we wanted also to talk not only about the role of gratitude in our tradition, but also about what's essential. Let me tell you a story. When I wrote my rabbinical thesis, I don't know, how many years ago? Noga, how many years ago? We were younger. Noga was there, and, and God knows how that happened. Noga knows how that happened because I was probably in a neurotic writing mode for a couple of months, and Noga was helping me to take notes, as we have like 300 books around our house. They were everywhere. Anyway, so I was writing my rabbinical thesis, and at some point you need to write the introduction. You need to explain what's the rationale behind your thesis. And I wrote about Jewish and secular values and how Jewish values are universal values, in general terms. But then in the introduction that you write at the very end, you need to explain the rationale. And my rationale was that, and I shared this story at the beginning, is that every time I say I'm a rabbi, then people make 20 assumptions about what I believe in. And they are usually the things that they don't believe in. Like, of course, you must believe this, and then all of a sudden you're accused of believing all the things that they have decided they don't believe, or all the things that they believe that a rabbi should believe. Mm-hmm. Like, so, whatever. But reality, that what you think, it doesn't matter. So you are an object to whatever story they have in mind. And I think it's a great thing to open the space, the field, and to ask religious leaders, what's essential to you? What's essential to you? What's essential to your faith? So we would love to hear from you. Any of you, whoever wants to go first.
I suppose let me go then first with this. Well, and this, look in the in Christianity, certainly in the Catholic Church, and I'm saying this in a Jewish synagogue, that honestly, that our faith begins with Jesus Christ. I mean, it does. And then specifically in his resurrection, there is, that is sort of, it's a point of faith, but it's a point of departure. Simply, there is no purpose for Christianity outside of that, at that point. Having said that, everything else that Christianity is about is a reflection on what does that mean, what does that call us to do. Who was this Jesus and so forth? And yes, we freely say he was a nobody in this world. I mean, it was basically a preacher from Galilee, et cetera, et cetera. But with it, yes, that he was special, but in an earthly sense was just basically like everybody else. I mean, in this sense, which is then a call out of that. That becomes the next essential thing. That since Jesus was in effect, I say here, a nobody, it means that we must love everybody. And the church become, that in effect, our faith is not, a set of doctrines or something like that. I mean, but it has to be enfleshed. It means nothing. It's just spiritual, floating in the air stuff. Unless it is enfleshed, and it's enfleshed first in the church, and then we call the body of Christ, as it were, the church, and then afterwards, then literally in the treatment of others. And I mean, there are some very strong passages in the Christian scriptures to say, what good is it to say that you have faith if your actions do not prove it? And this is not about prayer and stuff like that. He talks about, suppose there's someone who is lacking shelter or lacking food. What good is it to tell that person, be well and keep warm, if you do not give him the necessities of life? And he continues saying, if all you have is faith and no actions, it is dead. And then he goes even on saying, well, some people say, well, I have faith, you have actions. I prove my faith through my actions. And this is it. I mean, that otherwise we're just floating in the air, and I mean, there are any number of esoteric doctrines that one could latch onto or what have you. It is in the action of what we do, and actually I've gone around to say a lot that pretty much. I'll let the others talk with this thing, but I think that thing in the end, that no matter where we start with our lives, really in the end, I don't care what religion you are or what ideology you are, what it ultimately depends on is what you actually do. That the rest of it is nonsense.
So in the Islamic faith, what's essential is we have a creedal statement, which is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah alayhi salam, that there's no God except God and Muhammad is his messenger. And often this creedal statement is misunderstood to be somewhat compulsive, coercive, and so on and so forth. There's a verse in the Quran in Surah chapter 8, verse number 24, which says, Istajibu lillahi walir rasuli idha da'akum lima yuhyikum. That come to that to which God and his messenger summon you to, that which gives you life and enlivens you. And there's an interesting principle whereby we all know we can never give birth to our own selves, and we can never live through our own death. And in Islam, the sanctity of life is very sacred. And therefore Allah reminds us in even Surah Al-Mulk, where he says, تَبَارَكَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ الْمُلْكُ وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. That glory be to the Lord, تَبَارَكَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ الْمُلْكُ, who is the king of the world, in whose dominion, in his hands is everything. He gives death, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ, he creates death and gives life in order to test which of you one are good indeed. And it's very interesting when you see here the word الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ, that he puts death before life, meaning it's a reminder that we're all going to one day go. When our time's up, we're going to leave. But all the while when you're living, you don't live as if you're dead. And that you basically live in service, in full action to that which is going to perpetuate your deeds well when you're gone, which we have a concept called sadaqatul jariyah, which means that once you leave, your endeavors of your actions from others, good, will compound and pass on as a spiritual profit in the hereafter. And we're also very cognizant of the fact that the hereafter comes first for us. It's like you die before your time, and that you live so that you're already in accountability towards God. You're already accounted for. So every action you do has to be a step of in-depth conscious, subconscious, and collective unconsciousness in your journey in this world. And that's therefore in Islam, it's an extension of the truths of the past and an affirmation of that's what was gone past us, and that's what is at present. And sometimes people ask me, what's your faith? I said, I'm a Trinity that makes sense. They go, what's that? I said, I'm a Jewish Christian Muslim. so it's incumbent for us to certainly hold that values of the past prophets, as well as believing in Ibrahim, Suleiman, David, Isaac, Ismail, Moses, to Prophet Isa, Jesus, as well as Prophet Muhammad, in the way of La ikraha fid din, meaning there is no compulsion in religion. قَدْ تَبَيْنَ رُشْدٌ مِنَ الْغَيِّ. Truth stands out clear from error. And in Islam we say there's your truth, there's my truth, and then there's the truth. We have to let go of those two truths there to see the truth in between. And it's always, as we say, as the Quran states, sulhatul khair, that you go out and you make peace with everyone, irrespective And I assure you, as much as there is a stereotype, I just like to say, what you see from Daesh and these crackheads and these tosspots, that's not representative of Islam at all. That's not representative of Islam. And again, you are very all sensible, intelligent people here. A percentage that is not equal to 0.0006% in medicinal or in calculus terms is insignificant. But these crackpots who are insignificant have been given on the platform of media significance, really puts to shame one's intelligence of thinking that there's 1.8 billion Muslims in the world. And we believed in what these crackpots believed essentially to be take people's lives, take people's properties, hallelujah, blow yourselves up. No, not at all. Not at all. Because life is sacred. And if that was the case, 1.8 billion Muslims, just think about it. If 10% thought that there were 72 virgins waiting for them up in heaven, right? If they really thought that, first class ticket, let's go. That's almost 180 million souls ready to go. More carnage than the Second World War. Why is that not happening? Because that's not the posture. It's never been prophetic. So I do believe, as much as there are crackpots here and crackpots there, like the Timothy McVeighs and so on and so forth, their essential religion is the religion of the devil. It had nothing to do with the values of Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. If you go to the core of our values and religious virtues, honestly, there's no difference whatsoever. We share the same air. We live on the same ground. And that's essentially what, for me, Islam is. Universal human brotherhood. And the Quran clearly says, وَلَقَدْ قَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. That if you are this child of Adam, you are honored by God. And that He made you tribes and nations, not to despise one another, but to get to know one other. And I think the one way I got to know my Jewish brothers and sisters in London was this beautiful restaurant which served some latkes. Man, they were top. Thank you.
In the context of being next to Hanukkah, and we eat fried things during Hanukkah, because we are here in Southern California, we are thinking about doing churros this year.
Churros.
We will be making some churros apparently. So we try to adapt, to be modern. I was listening to the two of you and your wonderful ideas, and while I was listening to you, my level of anxiety was growing, because one of the most complicated things to ask a Jew, or at least this Jew, is like, what's essential to your Judaism? And then it's like, well, this, and this, and I don't know. And the reason, I'll share something, don't worry. But the reason for that is because Judaism is not only a religion, and it's a multifaceted. Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan would say civilization, and therefore, like if I say, well, this is essential to Judaism, choosing, for example, a religious idea, I would be denying other, I think, central components to Jewish identity. But if we do speak about religion, I think that there are two ideas that are very important and essential. And again, the Torah and the Tanakh and of course the rabbis have all kind of attempts to answer to the question of what's essential. Isaiah says, "Agid lecha adam ma tov u'ma Adonai doresh mincha ki lasot mishpat bebat chesed b'tzne lechet im Elohecha." I will tell you, O man, what's good and what God requires from you to do justice, and to love loving kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. So, beautiful idea. Or the rabbis say in Pirkei Avot, העולם עומד על שלושה דברים, על התורה, על העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים. The world stands upon three pillars. Torah, which means study, the learning component of existence. It's not only the written Torah. It's the idea that we need to live our lives learning, that we need to approach the universe with curiosity. Avodah, which basically means the work of working in the temple, in the tabernacle. But this kind of work actually means spirituality. Understanding that if we deny the spiritual component of our existence, as the Imam was saying in the gala for the Islamic Center, then we start to worship other things. If we forget to worship God, we start worshiping human beings or politicians. And that's what our politics look like right now. Like religious fanaticism. Gemilut Chasadim, an act upon acts of loving kindness. And our tradition says that if you don't feed the world with loving kindness, it's impossible to endure. But there are two values that I think that are central to Judaism. One is the unity of God, and the other one is the value of simcha, joy. In the context of the unity of God, I think that the entire enterprise of the Torah is to help us understand that God is one. And we keep not getting it in the biblical narrative, so the biblical narrative keeps explaining that to us. So the first concept appears in the book of Genesis. The man and woman were created in the image of God, emphasizing the fact that we all come from the same Father, so no one can say, my Father is greater than yours. And then we come with this idea of ethical monotheism, saying we believe in only one God. As I believe, as an appeal for us to start believing in humanity. Ethical monotheism, the idea of one God, is not so much about God, it's way more about us. It's for us to understand that one God is represented in the diversity of humanity. Because as a matter of fact, the way in which we think about God is as infinite. So God is infinite. On the other hand, we say one. One, why? Because I want to be able to look at fellow human beings and to look at myself and say there's a spark of the divine presence within myself. In each one of you. And so the 10 Commandments, right? Like 5 out of 10. They focus on one God, one God, one God. And then we speak about our social interactions. Why? Because the foundation for our social interactions is to understand that there is one God. And to understand that every single life has the same value. But in the oneness of God, we also say, Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Now, an interesting thing about that claim that, listen, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. Listen, O Israel. Israel is the name that Jacob receives after fighting with this character, or tradition mostly says is an angel, and he becomes Israel, right, in the biblical narrative. Israel means the one who wrestles with God, the one who wrestles with himself, with his own existence, but not only wrestles, also carries on. So listen, O Israel, you guys that you wrestle with God, Adonai is our God. Adonai is one. Now, I have shared with you many times, but I'll say that again. The Torah doesn't say Adonai. It's not written Adonai. It's not written the Lord. By any means, not written that. It's written Yud Hei Vav Hei, which is something that sounds like Yeh or Yahweh, which is the closest word in Hebrew to being. So when you say, listen, O Israel, you guys that are wrestling with God, but you are trying to carry on, being, the source of all being, is our God, the source of all being, is one. It sounds very differently. And something about the word one. The word one writes echad. Now, when you see that word written, like if you have a little pizza, I don't even know how to call it, a little dot. Okay, you move that dot, you have acher. So they almost look the same. Dalet and Resh, they look the same if you remove a little dot. And teaches the Zohar, one of our mystical books, that the perception between being one and being someone else, just a little perception, just something that you are missing. You just need to, and I think that it's a beautiful thing that lies there about our ability to see ourselves and the ability to recognize otherness that might be beautiful and a blessing as well. And here's the last idea, the idea of joy, simcha. So we say that God is one, and that God wants you to live with joy, but wants you to find joy in your life. And Rabbi Jonathan Sachs says that simcha is not joy. Simcha, this value that is so important in our tradition, is the joy that is shared with others. So I think that we need to recognize the unity of God by recognizing that within ourselves, by recognizing that in others, and that we can experience joy in our life, the deepest meaning of joy, by being able to share that experience with others. Now, it's like 2 p.m., right? Like people are napping. I hope you are not. So, but thinking about sleeping, thinking about sleeping, like, are you awake? Are you still with us? So we'll ask one more question, and then we'll open the room for questions. It's like, what keeps you up at night? Should I begin with that one?
Yeah, maybe.
I think. So there are 2 things that can keep me up at night. Well, I wasn't thinking about that one, like 3. There are 3 things that can keep me up at night. It's a good thing that Noga is in the same room because they usually wake her up. But they know that they have a lesser chance with me. And yes, like I'm not thinking about what I ate at night, or if there is something that is very valuable in the refrigerator, so I can't sleep because I am particularly excited about that, to have that for breakfast. Now, let it be. We spoke about joy, right? Like a good laughing community is a good thing. So now more seriously, I think that one of the things that is most concerning to me, and I sometimes really wake up, is the growing divide in our society. It concerns me, the lack of perspective that I see, and I sometimes like to think that it's happening somewhere else. Like, I love to think that, well, yeah, it's happening there, but it's not happening that much in the Jewish community. And unfortunately, it's like I would like to dream that, but I can't even dream that. So the growing divide, the growing political divide, the growing divide in our perspective, the fact that we are losing the ability to talk to each other, and sometimes there's no way to speak. The fact that I recognize that there are people that are not willing to learn anything, and that there's no curiosity in their lives, and they just feed their confirmation bias. And on the other hand, there's this kind of competition in more liberal circles, with which I speak often also. There's who is more woke, who is more righteous, who gets it better, and how all the rest of the world is wrong, and how this doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter what words you choose, they are wrong, and then we have less less patience and all this cancel culture that is growing, and I'm afraid that we are losing more and more the ability to talk, the ability to learn, because we don't want to, or because we don't allow others to express themselves. And I think that that's eliminating empathy and kindness, because it's kind of filling us with fear. And I see that all the time. I see that in the rabbinical forums I participate on Facebook. I see that in conversations in our congregation. I see that I see that in myself also, in different situations in which I myself come too quickly to judgment. And I think that that's killing us as a society. It's preventing us from getting to know each other, from growing as communities and as individuals. And I'm very preoccupied about that. I think that that's also very bad for religion and for communities. And I'm hopeful that we will find words of nuance and kindness when we listen to each other, when we speak to each other, and when we try to make ourselves heard, even when we are right about things. That's a real concern to me.
Okay. Well, one.
Let's see if yours is worse.
Oh, well, no. I'll get to you with what you're saying too, because I kind of agree. But let's see. First of all, a lot of what I do is actually so I can sleep at night. I have to say that I've numerous times have run into situations actually here in Fullerton where really it's like, okay, if I don't do something, this is going to haunt me. And and as a result, a lot of things they do, that in fact they go and I really do try to do things so that I can sleep at night. But yeah, I mean, look, and again, I'm speaking in a or here in a Jewish community where you folks have gone through so much, and even still relatively recently, only a few generations ago. But I do honestly think that we are living, unfortunately, in interesting times, and like the Jewish or the Chinese curse, right? Of may you live in it. That I really do think that we are very close. This is really scary. With that, we could see the fall of American democracy in the next 5 years, and the repercussions of that. I tried to write about it actually. I don't know, and they actually didn't let me do that or whatever on this thing. But I said that the repercussions could be honestly the level of the destruction of the Jewish temple, or the sack of, or the fall of Constantinople in the 1490s. It will take hundreds of years to get out of this, because this country is a model to the entire world. It is the cradle of modern democracy, and if this falls, it will. It could really, really be bad. And the sad thing is that in certainly in my tradition, in the Catholic Church here in the States, that I really don't think that the bishop's hierarchy understands this of what really is at stake. And I mean, there is honestly a mentality, and look again, that our main issue right now, and it is a really strong issue, of the thing of abortion, right? I mean, the focus on killing a truly innocent life. I mean, where at the end of the day, no matter what the circumstances, this unborn child is completely innocent, and to destroy it is hard. But it's gotten to the point of trying to defend that unborn child, that's saying, what good is democracy, or if there's abortion? And the thing is there's going to be abortion, like they're going to be poor people forever. I mean, it's going to go on for forever. And the thing is that the loss of democracy, really, the ability of different groups to be able to get together and settle things, make an accommodation peacefully, it really could just plunge us into a dark age. And I mean, to the level of, basically Star Wars, a new dawn type of a thing, where it could be bad. And it plays out in so many ways, and some of it is, again, the loss of religion in our times, when things are just focused on one or two issues and really no more. That a lot of of course, that I've worked here a lot with the homeless. And the thing there is that there really is a fairly significant number of people who really believe that that the people who are on the streets or those who are poor just deserve to be that way, and and there is no need to help them at all. And this goes against all three of our traditions, and I would swear against anything before Nietzsche. I mean, I don't think that there's a single philosophy or religion out there that says that it's okay to not give a damn about the poor or about someone who's needy. I don't think there's anybody. And yet we have that, nowadays. And we have a lot of that, and then, in fact, of showing power. And then the final thing is and this is really, again, just so strange, that we are putting a large number of folks in this society are putting their faith into, honestly, a fat, stupid, lazy, great leader. That, and honestly, in all of those, every one of those items, I think, would be true. And when you compare that, even the communists and the Nazis at least had a work ethic or a philosophy. This doesn't have anything except this sort of Roman Imperium nonsense of someone who's just Jabba the Hutt type of a person who is somehow and we're supposed to give up everything that we stand for to follow this. They talk about abominations that are in both the Hebrew scriptures, the Maccabees, or the Book of Revelation. It's absurd. It's dangerous, and really, in a sense, we say, why?
What keeps me up at night? It used to be my daughter and her Disney books, but not anymore. I think the human condition universally right now really wakes me up, keeps me up in the night. And in particularly, we see today around the globe holocausts happening right in front of us. One being the Chinese Uyghur Muslims. And you got the Kashmiris in Kashmir. And then, not to mention, Syria, Libya, and the worstest one, Yemen, where now they're saying over 20 million people are going to be wiped out due to famine and starvation. Where I know is a report that I read in 2019 in the World Economic Forum, which stated that they slaughter 50 billion chickens a year. What's the human population? 7 billion? 50 billion chickens slaughtered a year, half of that goes to waste. In America, where 300 million population, is up to 9 billion chickens slaughtered every year. Half of that goes to waste. And thus the fashion industry produces up to 150 billion clothes a year. Half of that goes to waste. That reminds me of once I saw in my history exam a cartoon, and it was the depiction of the world. And the world was in a hospital, in a bed. And it had a thermometer and patches and stitches. And the three visitors were Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill. And they said, "How are we doing today to the world?" It was a terrible time at that time. Our brethren have suffered the Holocaust. It's a painful memory in your history. But this history now is a nightmare, a living nightmare today in the reality of many people's lives around the world. Then I remember one of the rabbis in the UK, he said that our accolade of never again, it meant never again. but it should never again extend to repeat for others too. And that suffering is not a monopoly.
Yeah.
Suffering is no monopoly. It happens to one side of the world, it's going to affect the rest side of the world. And you don't believe me? Take a look at what COVID has done. It's rocked from east to west. You still don't believe me? Look at what global warming is doing. 1.5 degrees, we're already up there. I have a daughter, 5. I see Rabbi Nico's children, and you have many children and grandchildren. They're going to be the future. But it will be extremely selfish to leave a future for these children that if the earth goes up another 1.5 degrees high, it's going to be unbearable for them. So these thoughts really make me think about our universal condition as humans, not as a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian. Faith one side. Let us please raise up beyond the barbed wire and look. Just because it's happened to these people, who's to say it's not going to happen to me? And it is happening. You had a maverick of a leader here who lied 20,000 times in 4 years. God's sake, man. How does someone have a consciousness like that? 20,000 times you're lying. I mean, if I lie once, my wife catches me. Did you throw the rubbish out? I'm done for. That's on a home level. But unfortunately, we're living in this algorithmic so-called world of virtual reality, and we're forgetting our divine reality. The spark Rabbi Nico's talking about with each and every one of us. And then it takes me to a poem that I remember of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. And strangely enough, being a Muslim poet, he was still the #1 best-selling poet in Israel. I was amazing. I remember a Jewish friend actually did a seminar on this. And why was it so? Because his poetry was so universal. And in fact, when Maulana Rumi passed away, he had tons of Jews who actually came to his funeral. And he said something very profound. He said, do not look at the age which is liable to decay, but look what's within you that's ageless, that shall forever live. For caring for one's soul is better than bread. For caring for one's soul is better than bread. And that's a very selfless expression of service beyond self. And it does keep me up in the night. But I'm also remind myself in those vigil times that when you are with God, you are not with creation. Because God's not the creation, He's the creator. And when you're with people, do not be with your ego. When you're with people, don't be with your ego. And wish for others that which you would wish for yourself. I am sure no one in this room would want to wish hell for themselves. I am positive on that. I'm sure nobody of you here would ever want to wish to be burning in hell. Likewise, we will never wish hell upon anyone else. But there is a responsibility for us, especially in this day and age, whereby my God, as a hadith, the Prophet, that the signs of the end of times is when the earth shall heat up. We can divide through borders. And Rabbi Nico said in lunch once, if a person drew a line, where would you want to be? And I asked him, did the earth draw the line? No. The earth will outlive all of us. History is proof of that. But how we live on the earth is going to be a testimony that did the idol of selfishness outlive mankind. That will be a travesty. And right now the idols are gaining prominence.
Thank you. So I think we have taken a bit more time of what we expected, and we are religious leaders. We do that all the time. So That wasn't a joke. I was just
It's a statement of
I was
fact.
just making a statement, like emphasizing a fact. So I think if you have questions you want to ask, we'll I think. Is there any question in the room? Like, let's show me hands. There's 1, 2. We're gonna take 2 questions.
Well,
We're going to take 2 questions, and we will give very to-the-point answers, and then we'll say a few words to close together. Mr. Cohen.
So I guess I represent half the room.
Obviously.
So I want to get back to this gratefulness, this idea.
I'll repeat what he says.
Excuse me?
You-
So I have a number of friends who have no religion. They are atheists or agnostics, and they are nice people. They're good people. And if you ask them, are they grateful? They are grateful, and they do good things. So what do you say to people like that about us?
So Henry's saying that he has a number of friends that are good people, they are grateful, and when he asks them if they believe or not, they say they don't believe, but they are good people and they are grateful. And so what do you say to people like that about ourselves?
Why can't they? Why are we religious?
Why are we religious?
Why do we need a God or one?
You tell them. I don't know. You were thinking about that. Was you?
that's a very good question. Well, I do think that it just is a lot easier to. I honestly think it's a lot easier to live with faith. The same things, both the good things and the bad things, in effect, happen to everybody. But I just would find it very, very hard to get over the difficult things without a faith in God. That's what you.
Same here. I believe in having faith. It makes a lot of sense, and one can just. I think Muhammad Ali once answered this beautifully in the BBC News once, and he said, "Look, if I told you that this cup, it created itself, that's my belief. You think me mad. If I said to you, hey, this suit that I'm wearing, it stitched itself and it made itself, it prepared itself, voila. What would you think?" They go, "Well, you're mad." He goes, "Well, it would be absurd to say, did the sun, the moon, the stars, the cosmos, the universe, did it just pop up by itself? No. But that doesn't mean in a compulsive sense that we are all going to conform to each other's beliefs. And this is the beauty of our humanity, that even though if one does not believe in God, who are agnostic, who are atheists and so on and so forth, and they could be good people, and God, there's not a discount of that. You welcome the good. Because just look at us, for example. We're 3 different faiths, right? But within all 3 faiths, we have charity. We have to give charity, doing good, so on and so forth. That's not exclusive. If we compound it all together, inclusively, we could achieve anything. And that goes out for the atheist and the agnostic too. Welcome on board in the ship of Noah, man. Let's not just drown. Let's go. So we always will welcome, because they're still our brothers and sisters. I can't discount them at all completely. However, as for why religion, obviously for many, many millions stroke billions, and for the messengers who have come, the divines of God, they make a lot of sense. And sometimes for people to catch up to the sense, it could be years of study to come to a single truth, and still they don't catch the truth. But as the Quran says, there's no compulsion in religion. The truth is always going to stand up clear from error. So with that, there's a space for those individuals who don't want to believe. But however, sit down, have a cup of coffee and some latkes, and let's talk it out. We can all accommodate.
You should try another Jewish food, like
There's another one,
matzah balls or something like that.
Soup. Barley soup is very nice actually as well. So.
Like the barley soup is good. When to train you in matzah balls or
And beef
something like that.
bagels, I really love them. In London, in Whitechapel, man, there was a Jewish bakery. It made the best beef bagels, and I would be queuing up there early in the morning just to get one. So there you go. I mean, it's
You see, halal and kosher, right? Like
well, you're the people of the book. We can eat from your food, mashallah.
we're talking about that. So maybe to chime in, I think first I commend you for the question because you were able to address a very deep theological question with gratitude. So, but I want to call that out and say you are asking actually a theological question. Like the gratitude is one of the aspects of what you are asking, but there is a deep theological question behind what you are asking. And I would say that I'm not so preoccupied about explaining others why they should believe what you believe or what I believe. The common Jewish approach to someone, to someone's question, like, do you believe in God, is in which, we in our tradition say that God has 70 names, and we have so many approaches to the divine presence and idea. Very hard to define. When my child asked me, like, do you believe in God? And I always share a story that I heard about Rabbi Salman Shlomi Schachter, who said that once when he was approached by his child, asking him, do you believe in God, Dad? He said, yes, but I don't believe either in the one you don't believe. And the meaning of that is that, do you believe in God as it is described in the Scripture? Exactly the way it is described in the Scripture? Well, you will get 70% of the Jewish people saying no. Why? Because that we refer to the Scripture as an interpretative tradition. So, like, do you believe in a personification of God? Well, some Jews do, some Jews don't. Like, so the idea of defining the infinite is like an oxymoron. It is an oxymoron. And therefore, would that say, then let's say the opposite. Believing in God, I don't know for the one who doesn't believe, but I know that for me it's a very good idea. It's a very good practical idea, because it is a reminder that all human beings have a common denominator, that all creatures deserve to be treated with dignity. Now, whether that God doesn't exist, I believe it exists, but whether it exists or doesn't, it's actually a great idea, because when you add the idea that you relate to your life in the world and to everybody's life in the room, and understanding that those lives have value, it changes the entire world. And therefore, once again, I would advocate in that context for the good idea. I wouldn't approach that context, that question with faith, but with a very pragmatic concept of what a good idea is to have a unifying value, not a value of uniformity, but a unifying value to lead our lives.
So the three of you actually said the same thing.
So you mean I shouldn't have spoken?
It's a good question.
It's very interesting. I have Caroline before you, Tony, and as we said too, I might make a deal with the friends here. Caroline came back from Egypt. Okay, so let me summarize it so everybody can hear also in Zoom. So Karen visited Egypt lately. She spent 2 weeks there, and she had the opportunity to visit families there. And she noticed that, or she perceived that women don't have the same status as men. She got that because of the access to education, and also she noticed that in houses, in family households. And the question is,
with regards to women in Islam or just in Egypt? Right. Sure.
okay,
So, as with regards to your question with women in Islam, it's very clear cut in the Quran Kareem that both men and women are treated equal. Being equal doesn't equate to the equality of the identicality of the gender. But in no way in Islam does it ever permit for a woman, just because she's a woman, to be downgraded as someone who has no equal rights. Time changes a lot throughout history. The Prophet Muhammad gave an edict very clear that the best of you are those who are the kindest to your wives, and I am the most kindest to mine. The best of men are those, he said. And he virtuously spoke about the vestibule and the status of a female, that heaven lies beneath the feet of a mother. That heaven lies beneath the feet of the mother. And in the history of Islam, Dr. Maulana Akram Nadwi from the Cambridge University, he did a thesis on the biography of the muhaddithat, meaning the female scholars of Islam, who were muhaddiths, who were masters in memorizing and preserving over hundreds of thousands of sayings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He wrote a compendium of 8,000 biographies of female scholars of Islam. 8,000. The Qarawiyyin University in Morocco, who was it funded by? Wasn't a man, it was a female entrepreneur, businesswoman. And the Qarawiyyin University is older than the Al-Azhar University in Egypt. The first woman to embrace Islam, who was she? It was the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, Khadija. Who was Khadija? She was a businesswoman, an entrepreneur. Did the Prophet Muhammad work for her? Yes, he did. So in terms of status of women, there are many misconceptions that need to be dispelled upon it. And unfortunately, time doesn't permit me, but I can actually dispel 20 on the top of my head. That due to cultural biases, like here, you have a very, promiscuity has grown very huge. In other areas, that will be shunned upon. But here they take it as liberality. That cultural biases are the things that dictate what are women to be and not to be. Islam is very clear in that women are the halves of the men. They're allowed to work, they're allowed to educate, they're allowed to earn money, and even the money they earn, they keep. They keep the money. Do you know who the breadwinner of the household is? The man. It's not like, oh God, I married you now, we have to provide, we have a team. No. You married her, you're the head of the household, you're going to provide, you're going to make sure your wife's taken care of, and your children, so on and so forth, as fard, obligatory. How they've been treated in Egypt, Egypt went through wars too. Afghanistan's a classic example. My wife's from Afghanistan, and my wife's a scientist. She's a senior analytical research associate scientist, QC, blah, 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 whatever. Yeah.
Mine too.
So, and she drives a car, and she wears Maybelline makeup.
And she also keeps the money, my wife.
So, mostly if you look around, you could go into other countries, even like Iran or anywhere else. Education is primed very high. Iraq is a country, before it got bombed out with an illegal war, 98% of the nation was literate, women included. So I feel you. I don't in any way feel proud of what happens to females in Egypt. And as for the Christians there are up to 20 million Coptic Christians living in Egypt 1,300 years on. So that's a testimony there was no compulsion against them. In India, the very country that has absolutely hammered the Kashmiri people, massacring Muslims right now, believe you me, if you had those fanatics coming here in the US, they'll be killing you at McDonald's for eating beef burgers. They would do that. And they have their own traditions that, listen, man, if your husband has died, you got to also kill the woman in the fire too. So it's called sati. It's called sati. And it's been going on. And that they have over 34 to 50 million female widows. Just because their husbands are dead, you can't get married again. So if you want to talk about inequality, there are nuances in their own religious texts. But in Islamic texts, it's clear cut. There's something called sunnah. And there's something called fiqh. I just want to clarify this very quickly. Sunnah is what the Prophet did. Fiqh is jurisprudential, meaning that there are scenarios in certain exceptional circumstances and so on and so forth. Nowhere and no one and no scholar of Islam can prove that the Prophet ever beat his wives. He never laid a single finger on them. Not a single finger on them. He loved them so much. In fact, when Khadija passed away, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he was going to bury her, they opened up the grave. He stopped the burial. He went down the grave first and lay down the grave and he said, "Oh grave, know who's coming. This is my wife." He got up and then he put her down. He had 3 beautiful daughters, 4, Fatima being one, and he would stand up when Fatima would come and he would say, "May my parents be sacrificed over you." He would sit her down first, kiss her hand. All of these virtues are what? To degrade women? Never. Islam never teaches you to degrade women. Cultures? I mean, yeah, some people said female circumcision is from the Islam. What are you talking about? That's an African tradition. It's got nothing to do with Islam. So hence, I feel your plight, but also it's very important to dispel. You could have followers, but that necessarily doesn't mean that they're following Islam correctly. Like Daesh, are you going to call them Muslims? Heck no. You're going to call these tosspot crackheads who, when people are accusing the Muslims of being terrorists, who has terrorism afflicted the most? The Muslims. Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, all of those nations, Kashmir, who's been afflicted with terrorism the most? The Muslims. It's not in our faith to go afflict terrorism. By who? A handful of idiots? Idiots? That's what I call them, idiots. I have no shame in saying that. I say it openly. You kill, and the Quran says it openly in chapter 5, verse number 32. You kill one human life as though you've killed the whole of humanity. You save one human life, you've saved the whole of humanity. And saying no, Jewish, Muslim, Christian.
Do you think that Muslims have been reading rabbinical text?
I think so, because
we've
been living with you very closely.
So maybe as a segue out of this question, and I think that it's an interesting thing, the connection that you are making. A couple of days ago, a report from HUC is the Hebrew Union College, my alma mater. I studied in Jerusalem, but has 3 campuses in the United States, and a report that speaks about the 3 campuses in the United States. Speaks about acts of harassment and that have happened in the rabbinical seminary towards students and different things, and also acts of harassment that were the worst kind of harassment and all the spectrum. And one of the things that came out of that report, little thing, but it's a big deal. But there are other things that are more, I would say, more horrifying, is that the Reform movement has been ordaining women to the rabbinate for many, many years. But until 2016, their ordination didn't have the title our rabbi and our teacher. It only said teacher, not our. So they remove the very traditional way to approach the rabbinical investiture. And why they did that? Well, I'm not sure, but what I'm sure is that cultures are constantly evolving, and religions have been around for many, 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 many years, and to say that we live in a cultural disconnect, it would be a misreading religions. The ultra-Orthodox Judaism, in its very form, is, for example, is a reaction to the upcoming or the upbringing of liberal Judaism. The denominations, for example, in Jewish tradition, happen when someone defines itself for the first time. And there the denominations and the polarization in these denominations was born. And that was a cultural process, not so much a religious one. And I think that constantly, religions, we are leading with the fact that we sometimes are carrying things that are from the past, and we struggle to change them, to adjust. And I think that the Imam here is making a very clear distinction, because I think that the question refers a lot actually to what's the role of woman in Egypt? And that's a completely different conversation, and an important one, but something to keep in mind. Do you want to add to that note?
If I
will you?
could, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, but
No,
first of all, I do want to thank you for the question, and that it is really far more general, and it certainly touches us as well. And actually, if I get to it, I mean, even within my own family, this has really been something that has been hard. I do have to say that when I entered the seminary, my sister was by far the most supportive person in my family for doing that. And within 2 or 3 months after that came the Vatican Declaration that women cannot be priests. And for the last 10 years, she's been basically estranged from all of us, my sister. So, and in good part over basically the position of women just in general, but I mean, really having this as an issue. Look, we're all parts of traditions that are ancient. And within the Catholic Church here, sometimes to say how things change is that it goes through several stages. The first one is, what the heck are you talking about? The second is, oh, don't do that. The third one is, no, we really mean it, don't do that. And then the last one is, as the church has always done. In a sense, that and we had a discussion sort of with the ministers a week and a half ago, more or less, on this kind of a question. And I was saying that one of the tragedies is that 100 years ago, the Catholic Church could have been presented as almost stellar when it came to the position of women in society. Because if you were an ambitious woman in the 19th century, I mean, with the nuns, I mean, you could run universities. You ran hospitals. The religious orders, Mother Cabrini ran a religious order the size of Exxon. I mean, still, 19th century where the only fast communication was telegraph. I mean, she went by boat across, circumnavigated the world several times during her time as a leader. And even today, or even now, some of the most intelligent, most articulate women when it comes to the question of women's rights are the nuns. That they have been really, really very, very articulate and gotten themselves into trouble at times, because we're at the point of the stage of we really mean it now. And eventually this is going to change. But I do think it is, that this is going to change eventually over time. Because just simply that in the early years of my being a priest, I was ordained in Oregon and was sent to Florida to be stationed over there by Disney. And so a family from Oregon came over there because it was Disney World. So they went over there. And so I went with them or whatever, and their 6-year-old daughter or 5-year-old daughter sitting in the car next to me, and she's explaining to me how she's going to become, when she grows up, she's going to be a priest. And she explains, just like I explained to her older brothers when I was a deacon over there, in the school, saying, well, the best thing about being a priest is you go to a class, and for 40 minutes you got 25 kids or 30 kids, and then you all send them home. And then she said, then that was, of course I wouldn't be able to have kids. And she's literally saying that, and I'm saying to myself, I'm not going to tell her that she's not going to be a priest, and the thing is that who knows in the future, how things go, because the Catholic Church in good part at the end is really ultimately a family. I mean, literally, in its language, Father or the Holy Father and so forth. And in this we have, I think, a lot in common with the Jewish community too. That in a family we argue a lot. Okay, we fight back and forth and so forth and all that. But at the end of the day, everybody comes to Thanksgiving, basically, or to Christmas and so forth. There would be just, in the communist era in Czechoslovakia with my family, I had uncles who were communists and I had uncles who were jailed by the communists, over their faith. And they all still, when it came to, grandma's birthday, they were all there. And they were all loved, and, everybody, and they got along. So it's a similar, thing. I think that this will be hard. It's frustrating as a challenge, but in fact, over time, really, the truth is the truth, and people do, and even churches and societies do ultimately change.
Thank you very much. And so, in order to, you all noticed that, right? Even if I didn't make the you had noticed that. So I want to thank everyone for being here. Father, Imam, is there? Before I ask you, I just want to say that we meant to have a female partner sitting with us, Reverend Dr. Mandy Yates, who couldn't make it because she's accompanying her mother-in-law on her very last way. But she's a partner in FEMA, and we are constantly in conversation with her. And it's important also to have a female voice in any forum we have. It wasn't possible in this context to have her, and we wanted to honor somehow our very friendly ongoing conversation, and we wanted to have a reflection of that. And therefore, she was the partner for this conversation. We had wonderful conversation just a few weeks ago, sitting in a coffee shop. And that's what we were trying to somehow reflect on in this kind of a discussion. I want to conclude by asking you if you have in a minute something you're grateful for.
Well, grateful for really this. This is really, really nice that we do live in a time when we are able to better share amongst ourselves, and I think that is a really good.
I'm just grateful for that there's a platform being opened up and inroads being made of joining hearts together. I really see a glimmer of hope, just like today Mr. Cohen said, it's a small step, but I will say it's a giant leap.
Amen. And I will say that the rabbis say in the Talmud, at some point, there's this phrase, which I think is beautiful. They say, Hebruta or mituta. They say, if we don't study with partners, Hebruta is the pedagogical methodology of the rabbis in the Talmud, we prefer death. So if we are not in conversation, that's how they extreme they were in this idea of being in dialogue, and the Talmud and our tradition is a reflection of that dialogue. And I think that we have the blessing of being able to be in dialogue, to be in Hebruta, with partners that come from all faith traditions, and it doesn't bring us any death, but the opposite, it brings us a renewed life. So thank you very much to all of you for being here. Thank you very much, Imam and Father. And we pray for having more of these opportunities. And there's a phrase that says, Ki beiti beit tefillah yikareh lechol ha'amim. Jeremiah says, because my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. So I'm glad that we were here to talk to each other and somehow pray together in this afternoon of Shabbat. Toda Rabba, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. God bless.
I forgot that. and someone wants some money. We just found it over here in the bag. The reason he's saying some because you need to tell him how much.